Hello and welcome. I am Zabraxi. Oh, the age-old debates of apples versus oranges, left versus right, physical versus digital. My mom always told me this would happen.
The digital versus physical debate. A heated conversation that feels both as old as the rocks you used to chew as a kid, and yet still seems like a brand new problem that humanity is trying to tackle for the very first time. While some other industries started to really see the effects of the digital boom during the early to mid 2000s, it wasn't until around 2010 where video games finally had to get ready to throw their hat into the ring. Sure, platforms like Steam had already existed for a bit by this time, but does anybody remember early Steam? That thing was trash. It was slow, ugly, it barely worked, and I even had Valve's own games not launch properly on the regular. And heck, we can actually go back a bit further to the Genesis in the early 90s when Sega announced the Sega Channel, an online service where you can stream games over your cable modem to download them onto a special cartridge, which you could then play on your Sega Genesis.
You're telling me that I can stay inside and not go to the store to get my copy of Shaq Fu like everyone else?
Yeah, talk about way ahead of their time. While not exactly the same thing, Sega essentially tried to spawn cloud streaming 30 years ago. Unfortunately, the technology just wasn't quite there, as you could expect. It sucked, let's just be honest. This led to severe download times, constant download failures. While this wasn't a commercial success by any means, there's no denying just how ahead of its time this service really was.
Yeah, but why would I do that when I can just go to the store and buy my copy of Shaq Fu like everyone else?
The Sega Channel wasn't the only attempt at companies trying to promote digital delivery methods at this time. Let's not forget that Nintendo also experimented quite a bit in this era with the Nintendo Power Flash cartridge. Essentially, you could buy a single flash cartridge from Nintendo Power and then go to kiosks at stores and even gas stations where you could plug the cartridge into a machine to then buy and download games at a reduced price. This wasn't just for one of their platforms, by the way, either. This system supported both the Super Famicom and the Game Boy, with the flash cartridges having enough space to hold up to about 8 games at once. Imagine if Nintendo did something like this again nowadays with Switch flash carts that you could dump your digital downloads onto. Wow, that might actually help game preservation. So there's no way they're doing that. The service was discontinued in 2007, but the question that I was always curious about is, why did Nintendo even start this service to begin with? Was it really to just reduce cost? Was it game preservation? Was it to battle emulation and piracy? No, none of the above actually. It was primarily driven because of shelf space.
Because why would you want to look at this when... Now that's more like it.
Of course, it's shelf space and convenience. Whenever this conversation comes up, anyone who is pro-digital, even a little bit, even if they prefer physical copies but can see the benefit to the digital angle, even those people know that it's nigh on impossible to argue against the accessibility of digital media. I mean, look at all the space that gets taken up. And this isn't even all the games we have. There's more over here in this other shelf. And this still isn't all the games I have, because there's a ton of others that are in totes at the moment because I just genuinely don't have a good way of displaying them at the moment. If I have to move, then I legitimately have to accept that part of the increased cost to my moving will come from bringing all these games with me. With digital, I just log back into my account on one of the 17 launchers I have to download, and bam! All of my games are there, and I didn't have to pack a single one of them into a box and pay for shipping. I don't have to risk the copies of my games getting damaged on the move across country because they're not a tangible item to get worn down or broken. Yeah, degradation of quality on physical media is its own other problem too. Things just die after a while. Despite my constant attempts, I've had to fully accept that apparently I can't just not be affected by the second law of thermodynamics. I've been trying. Still getting older. Things degrade, they break down over time. Entropy is a fact of life, and heck, my copy of Yoshi's Island is proof of that. Look at this thing. That's the wrong label. Yeah, somehow this copy got a ton of whiteout spilled on it, and I had to replace the label.
I still to this day have no idea what I was doing to make that happen.
But since Yoshi's Island is one of my favorite games of all time, I knew I needed to clean it up and throw a new label on it. So I picked this one, because I thought it looked cool. Or take a look at my Twilight Princess insert. As you may immediately be able to tell by the different artwork and the insanely low pixel count, this also isn't an original.
I like to call this work of art I let my friend borrow my game, and at least I got the disc back.
Quick question for you. Do you like being able to save your games? Yeah, since even the 80s, this has been a pretty nice feature in video gaming, and, well, old cartridges use save batteries to keep those files alive, and if those batteries were to ever drain out, then goodbye every single save on that cartridge. It's a good thing that this only happened to me with one of my favorite games of all time, Pokemon Crystal. Goodbye, Hootie the Noctowl. You weren't good, but you were mine. I'm not sure if you can see it from the camera footage here, but this was the first time I had ever had to replace the battery in a cartridge, and I was so afraid of screwing up the solder job that I just wrapped the connections around in electrical tape to secure them down. But hey, it saves now, so my cartridge might look really dumb, but Hootie Jr. will be able to carry out his father's legacy. So I'm just gonna stick with digital games from now on because they won't die on me, and at least when I purchase the game, I'll just go right on ahead and be able to play it immediately after it downloads.
I'm just gonna grab a game off the shelf real quick. I'll be right back. You know, it actually is just kind of cool seeing all your games on a shelf, isn't it?
Yeah, there's definitely something oddly satisfying about seeing a nice, full, and clean video game collection. It's like walking into a room full of things you love. I mean, that's kind of great. It also starts so many conversations, like when people see my copies of the Zelda CDI games and ask, what the f is wrong with you? Cleaning and organizing can be so satisfying. I mean, just look at the incredible success of the game Unpacking. At first glance, this game looks so boring, but give it like 20 minutes of your time, and you'll be questioning why you haven't been taking things out of boxes more often in your life. But seriously, I just love to look at people's collections online. It's so satisfying. Have you ever been scrolling through YouTube and you see this random person that you've never watched before and they're doing a game room tour, and now you're somehow 45 minutes in to see every single game this person has and how they have 14 consoles all hooked up to a single 17-inch CRT? I can't be the only one, right? Like, I can't be the only one who sees a new Metal Jesus room tour video and I'm watching all of them from years past to see how the progression has gone. It's just so fun to see other people who have a shared hobby show off all of the stuff that they love as well. I'm not a big figure or statue collector, but I have some. I've definitely toned it back quite a bit in recent years, as I've just had to accept that if I want things to stay clean, then I can't have all the amiibo and first for figure statues that I want. But there are a few that I'm genuinely happy to own. I've always loved just how the Spyro figure looks, and these Zelda and Link statues from Breath of the Wild are pretty nice and match decently well. I even have some less common ones like the statue from the Kingdoms of Amalur Collector's Edition, because that game is genuinely awesome, and I'll always look for any excuse to bring it up. Then I have potentially my favorite, which is this Ritlock Brimstone statue, because Guild Wars 2 is just one of my all-time favorite games, and it's fun to show off lesser-known titles. Oh, and then I have this little Palawa Joko figure from Guild Wars, because he deserves praising.
Praise Joko! Alright, now that's out of the way. Let's see how my download's going. Alright, it's not going to be all smooth sailing. Maybe we have to wait a little bit after we buy the game to be able to play it. But hey, digital still allows smaller developers to be able to get in at a lower cost, right?
Actually, yeah. Very much right. This new digital landscape has shattered the ceiling for so many more independent developers and game designers to put their work out into the world. I mean, sure, not everything is gonna be a winner. Games like Deep Space Waifu are real now, but we cannot deny just how many more creative minds are able to enter the industry. Anybody, like you, or God forbid me, can just throw our trash up on the Nintendo eShop and make it harder for everyone else to get good games. How awesome is that? By just being able to make your game and then throw it onto a digital storefront, it removes so much cost. Shipping logistics, manufacturing costs, retailer shelf fees, all of those disappear immediately when you can just throw your game on Steam. It is impossible to deny the benefit that storefronts like Valve, Sony, Microsoft, GOG, Nintendo, and Epic Epic Games. That was a good one. We can't pretend that these places haven't opened so many players and developers alike to so many new possibilities. I have spent so much time and money on Steam and the Wii Shop and the eShops over the years that I genuinely don't regret any of it, because all of the cool games I've been able to experience have been worth it.
Yeah, I don't regret any of it.
We've gotten so many legendary games like Super Meat Boy, Hollow Knight, Vampire Survivors, Bug Fables, and damn, Shovel Knight, and these titles owe almost their entire existences to the fact that people were able to take a risk and make a game without needing the backing of major publishers to front a bunch of physical production costs. One of my all-time favorite developers, Supergiant Games, released Bastion as their opening title and specifically mentioned at the time that they were only able to do this because of storefronts like Steam. Now they've gone on to make the incredibly, legendarily underappreciated Transistor, the insanely unique Pyre, and the massive success that is Hades and its soon-to-be sequel. Bastion still, for me, stands as one of my all-time favorite games, and it's kind of insane to think that there was a potential future that this didn't exist. These experiences just wouldn't have been able to get started if the only option was physical media in a physical world. But while digital media gets all the perks of being digital, physical media gets all the perks of being physical.
Wow, that sentence sucked.
There are some genuine perks to owning your game physically that is either impossible in the current digital landscape or just not as simple, like sharing your games. Yeah, Valve, Sony, and Microsoft have all started to get in on allowing this type of stuff, but realistically it's still just so much easier to just hand a case over to someone, like was most famously shown in that Sony video years ago. It also helps being able to resell your games to buy new ones. Now, for some of you, that might sound like a sin most foul, but for many, the best way to buy new games is to get rid of the ones that they're done with. Sometimes you have to sacrifice owning a past experience in order to allow for new ones, and that's kind of the point of this whole living thing, right? Is to have new experiences. Let's not kid ourselves. It's kinda nice being able to pay $60 for a full-priced game like Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door back in the day, and then trading it into GameStop for a nice solid $2.99 a week after release, so you're able to buy Hannah Montana the movie on Nintendo DS.
I hate you.
There are other options nowadays too. If you want to be able to resell your old stuff to buy new stuff, then, well, look no further than the tried and true eBay. Yeah. It can be a bit hit or miss on there, but eBay is always going to be this reliable spot to check for deals. There are some other places though, too. In the last year or so, I've had some insane luck on deals from places like Mercari. It's basically eBay and Facebook Marketplace as like a hybrid, and it's really great and super easy to negotiate offers with people on the fly. Seriously, I've gotten so many great games on there for way less than what I would have paid on eBay. If you're interested in buying things, especially retro game related, give it a shot. And another, which I just mentioned, is Facebook Marketplace.
No, yes, okay, it's true. Facebook is the cesspool of human potential. But Marketplace? Seriously, Marketplace is actually a pretty good place to get good deals on basically anything and everything. But you know what's an even better deal? Just not having to rebuy your games.
Physical media dies, it degrades, it breaks. Sometimes you do everything you can to just keep an old cartridge alive, but it just still dies.
No!
This is where digital gets to shine yet again. Your games don't just break into disrepair out of nowhere. They don't require constant upkeep with save battery replacements or replacing capacitors. You just buy the game, can download it on anything whenever you log back into that account, and that's it. You don't ever have to re-buy anything. You don't have to be like me, where I ended up buying 2 copies of Wind Waker because I had lost my first copy somehow and needed to replace it only just to find the original later again. Or better yet, I did the exact same thing again with the Zelda Collector's Disc, and then I somehow lost those 2 and had to buy a 3rd copy. Unlike physical, you don't have the possibility of forgetting where you put your games. And if the DRM is fair on a platform, you can theoretically not even ever have to load a launcher to play them. You can just copy and paste your installer over and over again ad infinitum. And then you get these weird physical digital hybrid options where some of the game is on the disc and other parts still need to be downloaded. Xbox is kind of famous for this. A lot of the new Xbox Smart Delivery games do this, where because of the fact that Microsoft still doesn't use high-capacity discs, it's actually only the Xbox One version of the game that is on the disc, and you end up needing to download the Series X version. You know, for how smart Smart Delivery actually really is, this is a bit stupid, and there's such an easy solution to this. Just make the better discs and put the whole game on the disc. If Sony can do it, you can do it, Microsoft. Unlike the Switch, that is, which has so many different sized cartridges with increased production costs associated with each storage increase that a lot of companies just kind of settle for the smaller capacity carts and just slap a message on the box that says, you need a micro SD card too. Like, imagine that for a moment. Doom on Switch, for example, needs a 10 gigabyte micro SD card to play it. So Bethesda and id are actually out here saying, hey, by the way, in order to play our game, you need to buy it, and then you also need to buy some proprietary storage as well. We don't even make money on that extra thing that you have to buy, but yeah, you're gonna need that too. But fine. Okay, honestly, at least with Doom on Switch, for example, the single player campaign is entirely on the cartridge, and it's just the multiplayer you're downloading. It's not a perfect solution, but it's probably the best compromise anybody could ask for. Then you have things like the Mega Man Legacy Collection 1 and 2 on Switch. I mean, hey, it's a combo pack, so that's a good deal, right? Well, actually, only the first Legacy Collection is on the cartridge, and you still need to download the second one.
Just put them both on the damn cartridge and charge me $5 more or something.
And if you think it's just third parties on the Switch that do this, absolutely not. Nintendo published games aren't excluded either. When they ported Bayonetta 2 to the Switch, which by the way is a wonderful port, they included the original Bayonetta in the same purchase, which was great. But the first game is actually just a download code. Why? This stayed like this for years until finally, when Bayonetta 3 received its release date, Nintendo confirmed that Bayonetta 1 was also getting its own physical release. Oh, and don't forget my absolute favorite, the digital-only physical games. These are some really good things. But can someone explain to me why DuckTales Remastered on PS3 has a digital code-only physical box? A digital code-only physical box. Yeah, this is a physical PS3 box that just comes with a digital slipcode inside of it. Okay, but why? Why go through this much trouble only to then bail out at the last second? The PC version of Doom Eternal did the same thing too, by the way. You buy the box hoping to have a disc with an installer to future-proof your purchase, only to open the box and have a fake cardboard disc and a code. Why? Who would buy this?
Well, now don't I look like an idiot?
But the biggest one that gets me is free-to-play games getting physical releases. Who does this benefit? Is it really only so that grandma can get Timmy an Apex Legends box for Christmas? I know these things have packs in them with skins and currency or whatever, but this just doesn't make sense. Who's buying these? It's the most anti-digital and anti-physical thing that could possibly exist. Who is actually buying a physical copy of Fortnite of all things?
Well, now don't I look like a fucking idiot?
Doing this whole hybrid thing just doesn't make sense to me. All you end up getting is the bad parts of both with none of the benefits. For example, digital games get delisted all the time, but then you can't buy them, but as long as you have the physical copies, you can at least still get them and have access to that title if you ever wanted to again. This at least means the power changes hands from the retailer or the publisher to the owner of the physical media in terms of keeping that product available. If you take care of your stuff, then the game will live longer regardless of if it's taken off the shelves or removed from digital distribution. Some of you might say, yeah, but I've already bought the game, I'll just download it again. Yeah, I've heard that one before. Let me tell you, don't be too confident. Remember the PT demo on the PS4? Yeah, after that was pulled down, if you ever uninstalled that demo, you would never be able to download it again. Because of that, now you have PS4s that still have the demo installed selling on eBay for the cost of a brand new PS5, and that price is only going to increase over time. And just when you think this might not happen to you, well, I've been there, and it's not just happened to me once, but several times now. Another high-profile case of this was Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. It's a fantastic beat-em-up with some insanely good music from Anna Monoguchi that I've actually had the fortune of seeing be able to perform the entire OST live in Boston not too long ago. Needless to say, I love this game, and nothing was more crushing at the time than seeing it removed from Xbox Live Arcade and never being able to download it again. Okay, thankfully not never, because it did come back online 6 years after it had been pulled down and was available for repurchase. So this time around, I just bought a physical copy.
I will never lose you again.
Think that might have been the only time it affected me? No, there are still quite a few more times like this that's happened over the years in my time that I've switched between my digital and physical preferences. Another time that this hit me was a game I absolutely fell in love with years ago called Transformers: War for Cybertron. So yeah, I'm not the biggest Transformers guy. I think the cartoon is alright. I don't basically like any of the movies, but what I did like is this game in particular. War for Cybertron is a surprisingly great game with a fantastic campaign that also included a multiplayer mode that I sunk so much time into. It was like playing a more fast-paced Armored Core with the same customization essentially. One day, I went onto Steam to play through it again and to see if maybe the servers were still up, and, well, it wasn't there. I don't mean like it wasn't there to buy again, but somehow, for some reason, it also got removed from my Steam library. Activision had pulled all of the Transformers games down, and for some reason, only some people had it also pulled from their libraries. When I contacted Steam directly about this, they quite literally told me there's nothing we can do about it. Sweet.
And honestly, this is why it's so hard for me to really pick a side in this conversation sometimes, because I've been in both camps. I've been all digital, I've been all physical, and now I'm like a mixture of both. And it seems like that's actually where most people are. They buy some physical games here, some digital games there. And honestly, sometimes what you buy and when all depends on... This is embarrassing, hold on, let me check what the email was. There's a Steam sale happening right now. I'll be right back.
Herein lies one of the largest factors as to why someone buys a game physically or digitally: the price. Whatever it takes to save a couple bucks, because if you save enough over several purchases, then you might be able to buy a whole new title with the savings alone. It's like a buy 4, get 1 free deal sometimes. This has been easily the largest factor in my own game buying behavior practically all of my life. When I look at my game library, the split between physical and digital is rather evenly split, and buying games on sale is probably the biggest reason why. Some people might think I'm a physical only buyer when I mention that I have over 1,000 physical games, but then I look at my digital libraries and I have over 1,000 games there too.
What am I doing with my life?
But if I was to look at the cost of digital games and physical games, which ones win out here? Well, neither, really. It's basically all about timing, because sales will entirely dictate whether you get a good deal or not. For example, if you want to buy a game 3 months after release, then odds are the physical purchase will be a huge significant savings, since the game will have been discounted dramatically already, unless it's Nintendo. So then physical wins, right? Well, not really. Sure, even years down the road and the base cost of a digital game might still be the exact same as the original retail price for some reason, but occasionally you'll have these crazy sales where you can get even high-profile games for over half off. Unless it's Nintendo. There is a reason that the Steam summer and winter sales are so famous. The deals you can stumble upon are absolutely nuts sometimes. They're so good, in fact, that the first ever winter sale that happened after I got my first job, I spent so much money that I stayed over a friend's house for a couple of weeks and convinced him that something was wrong with my bank account because I had just blown all my money on video games. Basically, if you're cool with spontaneous purchases for games that you might not have been specifically looking to find, then digital can save you a ton of money. But if you're ever actively hunting down a modern game in particular, then more than likely, physical is going to be the cheaper bet. When it comes to retro games though, your guess is as good as mine. That space is still operating basically without any rules. All it takes is to see the cost of games like Little Samson or Panzer Dragoon Saga or the Pokemon games for some reason, and you'll just kind of want to swear off video games entirely. There are clearly a lot of different reasons as to why you might want to buy physical or digital. The answer to your own personal purchase decisions probably lands you somewhere in the middle, where you might buy some games online and some in a store. Or you might buy games on a sale on the Nintendo eShop, for example, after you just waited 30 seconds for it to try and load the next row to browse. But this topic is completely dominated and overshadowed by 2 talking points. Talk about this conversation long enough with anyone online, and without question, these 2 points will pop up: games preservation and ownership. Ironically, both being selfish requests under the guise of altruistic intentions. Basically, game preservation being,
No, this needs to be preserved and protected.
with ownership just being,
No, it's mine!
the whole argument of ownership could actually be pretty easy to solve. The crux of the argument is that if you buy a digital product, you don't own it. I can only confidently speak on laws within the United States, but overall, yes, this is true in my country. If I buy software digitally, in most cases, I don't own that software, but rather I own the license that allows me to activate and access that software whenever I'd like. That's not so bad, right? I mean, at that point, it's just semantics. Well, no, not quite, and that's the crux of the problem. Almost every license agreement regarding software, video games especially, will clearly state that the rights holders and distributors have the full legal authority to revoke your license at any time for any reason without any notice necessary. There are very, very few exceptions to this rule. GOG.com is pretty notorious for being extremely light on their DRM and licensing. But overall, in most places, if you buy something digitally, you can lose it at any given moment, and better yet, in the United States, it's not even guaranteed that you'll be refunded for a license that's been revoked. This is a pretty damn one-sided relationship now, isn't it? Now, realistically, how often do these worst-case scenarios happen? Very rarely, but services do discontinue and then you still lose access. Is it really considered paranoid to assume the worst case could happen to you?
Yes.
Is it still worth remembering this and making educated purchasing decisions around it?
Yes.
This is where physical outright wins mostly. Unless you get a game that has some crazy on-disc DRM or doesn't have a full game on disc or cartridge, if you buy a physical copy, you own it completely. To use the United States as an example again, this applies to basically any physical good in this country. If I want to buy a 3DS and mod that hardware with a capture card, I can do that. If I want to modify my consoles to put HDMI mods in them, I can do that. If I want to rage at just how terrible Shaq Fu is and destroy it with a hammer, I can do that. Until litigation changes in countries to ensure full ownership of a digital good, this is where physical media will continue to stand out for the most part. Basically, we need a politician to have their favorite video game pulled from Steam in order to get them to see this as a problem. How much you care about this will depend on how much you've been affected by it. Personally, I've already lost quite a few games that I'll never be able to repurchase. So yeah, I do tend to buy a game physically if it's available, even if it's a couple dollars more, because I don't want to keep losing my stuff again. And then this brings us to games preservation.
Oh boy, preservation could be its own entire episode.
Most of the power behind preservation lies within the digital realm due to a technique called emulation.
Oh boy, emulation could be its own entire episode.
In the retro scene, you basically have two options. You can either hunt down physical hardware in order to preserve your access to the game and to get the original experience, or you can just emulate it. When it comes to modern games, I mean, honestly, the same basically applies. As software and hardware has evolved over the years, though, the physical and digital debate here has slowly started to become more divided, while also being acknowledged to be closer and more cooperative than ever before. Sure, there is nothing like running an original cartridge on original hardware on an old CRT TV. Totally fair. But the power of emulation today is so good that projects like the Mister have the potential to emulate consoles themselves on a hardware level through FPGA technology to essentially recreate the original experience, almost shot for shot. Will it be exactly the same? No. But there are so many more settings, tweaks, and accessories that it allows players to utilize emulation to completely customize the exact experience they desire. I would love to get a Mister myself one of these days and go over one because I absolutely love playing all of my cartridges on original consoles, but I can't deny that having a small box that can almost perfectly emulate a console and be hardware accurate, but can then also upscale games to display on a 4K TV in one box I mean, man, that's kind of awesome, right? I'm not alone there. All of those games will have genuinely been preserved, and I'll have access to a library of titles that I never would normally have had. I might actually be able to play Little Samson instead of spending thousands of dollars on a copy that I can't even guarantee it works. As time goes on, those cartridges are only going to break more and more, and working units will become more and more rare, which means that physical acquisition will become more and more difficult, which only locks more and more people out of accessing and experiencing the legacy of the greatest art form in human history. And this doesn't even account for decompositions like Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time decomps. It's wild to me that after all these years, potentially the best way to play Ocarina of Time, my favorite game, might just be on PC in full glorious 4K in 16:9 widescreen at 60 FPS. That's so cool.
But does it come in a cardboard box? No, then I don't want it.
So what it all comes down to really is preference. Yeah, sure, that's not a sexy or dramatic conclusion, but how entertaining would a video be if it was just this?
Hello and welcome. I am Zabraxi. Should you buy games digitally or physically? Whatever you want. Bye-bye.
Okay, actually, that might have been pretty funny. But clearly the decision isn't a cut and dry formula. It's more like a scatterplot of factors that forms a sliding scale. Oh, there's a good deal? Then buy it. It's the same price and I like putting plastic on a shelf? Buy it. It's kind of a complicated problem that is often usurped by either our impulsive purchasing habits or by past pain points. For me, probably the biggest thing is ownership. Until software is held to the same legal standing as physical goods in terms of ownership and access, I will totally spend an extra couple of dollars or wait a day to get a physical copy. It's not that I necessarily like having shelves full of games. I mean, sure, this is a nice consequence, honestly, because I get to proudly exclaim how much of a loser I am for owning Zelda CDI games. But I just love the feeling of grabbing a game off the shelf, throwing it into the ugliest console ever made, sitting on the couch, and just playing.
Well, looks like I'm gonna finally start getting to play some games, so I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye! Here we go. Oh, come on, still?